This is a song we've done a while ago, and hope you can join in with us. Here we go. All right, let's try this one more time. Welcome to Common Thread this morning. We now have lyrics, which is a great thing when it's time to sing. This is We Are One. It's been a minute since we've done it, but I hope you can join in with us. There's a part that echoes at the end that is extra easy and user-friendly. Let's sing together. We are one. We are one. We are all one in God. We are love. We are love. We are all the love of God. Beauty surrounds me, falling at my feet, as I hear the calling of the Holy One in me. We are whole, we are whole, we are all the wholeness of God. We are strength, we are strength, we are all the strength of God. Beauty surrounds me, falling at my feet, as I hear the calling of the Holy One in me. We are made.
We are made.
We are made.
We are made.
We are all made of God. We are one.
We are one.
We are one.
We are one.
We are all one in God. We are.
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 Well, good morning, friends, and welcome to Common Thread. We are one, you are one with us, and if you are here, you belong. We welcome you in a special way if this is your first time. We know it's the first time for a few of you. And we are so glad you're with us this morning, and we would love to get to know you better, but only if the feeling is mutual. And if it is, you can go to this QR code or the URL. We'll send you a zero-pressure email with some information about our community, and we'll give you the chance to connect with someone from our community, because information only goes so far. It's getting to know the people in our community that has been life-changing for many of us, and we'd love to hear from you. And as a community, we care for each other very much. And we care for each other in a particular way when folks are having a hard time. And in fact, it's in such hard times that our relationships are strengthened. So if you're going through a rough time right now and you want someone to listen, you can always go to our website or use this QR code to let us know. Morgan will reach out. We also have trained listeners who hold space in the library down the hall after the service. And since our listeners are all trained in the practice of self-awareness, you might also find that they may be able to offer a perspective on your situation that you can't see. Several trained listeners have done that for me, including my friend Dawn, who is our listener today and just so happens to be the leader of this initiative. And by the way, I just want to say how grateful I am for the work you've done to make this happen, Dawn. I know it's helped a whole lot of people, so thank you for seeing a need and for fulfilling it. So head down the hall to see Dawn after the service if you want, or send us a message. If you want someone to stand with you, we want to stand with you. And let's affirm together as we do each Sunday, if you are here, you belong.
If you are here, you belong.
We are, every one of us, carriers of the inner light.
We are, every one of us, carriers of the inner light.
And we are, every one of us, carriers of divine breath.
We are, every one of us, carriers of divine breath.
And I'd like to ask everybody to just close your eyes for a minute and let that sink in. Every person in this room is a carrier of divine breath. God is within each one of us. And so, with sacred intention, keep that in mind as you stand to greet each other and pass the peace.
Well, good morning, live stream folks. Some of you here on Sunday joining in, others times shifting and watching later. The best part of Common Thread, we have always worked really hard to create authentic community together, to create a space where we can share our lives in very real ways and talk about the good parts and the ugly parts and still belong to one another after we do. Well, during the pandemic, we, like a lot of people, learned that we could do that in an online way with this catch. We can sustain, we can even strengthen our spiritual friendships in an online way if those relationships have already been established.
Hi, Josh.
The harder part we have found since then is to start
It's good to
those
see you.
kind of
And I mean to cut
authentic
you off from
spiritual
Archie.
friendships and do that online. And the primary hurdle of that is inviting you into a space where friendships can begin. So later on, we're going to ask you to click a link to be involved, and that's just not something people do when they're sitting watching a screen. When we do watch a screen, we're usually barraged by people wanting to sell us stuff, so we've got a built-in don't do that instinct, and I bet you have that, I do. Consequently, starting authentic spiritual friendships online, yeah, it's harder. So, when that invitation comes later in the service, here's our promise. We're not going to sell you anything. All we want to do is create more spaces where we can practice authentic community together. So I hope you'll let us send you that invitation, and good morning, and welcome. We're glad you're here.
It's great to get a chance to greet everybody. We're going to sing one more song this morning, and if we could sing that, if you could all join us standing, since we've just been standing, our legs are warmed up. And this is God Teach Us to Be One. I'll sing the lead part, and you all sing the echo with Melissa. Restart. Here we go. From the mountains to the shore,
God, teach us to be one.
with the homeless and the poor.
God, teach us to be one.
When a sense of hope is strong,
God, teach us to be one.
when our strength is almost gone.
God, teach us to be one.
God, teach us to be one. God, teach us to be one. May unity shine like the sun through everyone. When we cry to you in prayer,
God, teach us to be one.
when we don't believe you're there,
God, teach us to be one.
when we feel your gentle hand,
God, teach us to be one.
when we just don't understand.
God, teach us to be one.
God, teach us to be one. God, teach us to be one. May unity shine like the sun through everyone. When we're walking in the light,
God, teach us to be one.
when our hearts are dark as night,
God, teach us to be one.
when we get what we desire,
God, teach us to be one.
when we're going through the fire.
God, teach us to be one.
God, teach us to be one. God, teach us to be one. May unity shine like the sun through everyone. You can go and have a seat. Thank you.
God, teach us to be one. It's a solid request because oneness can be a hard concept to grasp. In fact, I think having a hard time grasping it is kind of baked into our human experience. Like, we're kind of not supposed to get it without putting in the work to get it, because it's the work that helps us grow. Not just as individuals, but us in our unity with each other and the divine. The good news is that when we start doing the work, we do begin to see it. We begin to see that our separation isn't the bigger truth. We begin to see that our unity is. And as we've been talking about the past few months, it's not something we can see with our brains alone. It's our hearts, as organs of spiritual perception that literally connect us with each other and with all that is. And when we access this truth with our entire beings, when we know it in our minds, when we sense it in our bodies, and when we access it through our hearts, something changes in us. You know, Jesus said, love your neighbor as yourself, which we've often misinterpreted to mean love your neighbor as much as you love yourself. But what he really means is your neighbor is you. Love your neighbor as yourself. When we awaken to the reality of our oneness, seeing the other as us, which translates into loving the other as us, love begins to become a thing we don't have to work hard to do. It just flows. It just is. So, let's see if we can do that together this morning. Let's see if God can teach us to be one through our practice together. If our love can begin to flow from us, through us, and to us, just a little easier this morning. And after the contemplative practice, we'll open the floor to anyone who wants to share what is on your heart this morning so that we can, together as one, hold you in our collective heart. So now, I invite you to find a comfortable place in your body. Close your eyes. Take a few deep breaths and relax. Place your hand over your heart and feel its rhythm. Breathe deeply and imagine drawing in peace with each deep breath. and exhaling tension with each full, long exhale. A full exhale that allows your heart to literally rest on your diaphragm. Now, see if you can draw your mind down into your heart. Visualize a warm, radiant light glowing in your chest. One that expands and contracts with each heartbeat. Now, see if you can visualize this light extending beyond your body, forming an expansive field of loving connection, connecting with the expanding and contracting light emanating from the hearts of those around you. Those sitting here right now, perhaps around a table or beside you. Just sink into that connection for a moment with the people right beside you. Now imagine that light expanding around this room, connecting with everyone in this room. This field of light and oneness, this interconnectedness, this oneness. Imagine it moving downstairs, connecting with the hearts of our children and our teachers. The hearts of all the people in the various faith communities here on campus. People who live in this neighborhood. And beyond, connecting with your family, your friends, all the people you love, all the people you find hard to love. Feel this sense of interconnectedness, knowing your heart's energy is an integral part of an infinite network of belonging and connection where every action has a ripple effect beyond what we can see right in front of us. Now, I invite you to take a moment and reflect on our obligations one to another through this connection. Obligations that you might imagine less as heavy mandates, but more as bonds that through our hearts connect us. Bonds that awaken in us our deep desire to know this connection fully and lead us to action in love that affects the collective whole. And as you breathe, visualize sending waves of love, compassion, and understanding through your heart to everyone connected to you, which is to say, everyone. See these waves spreading to our community, a community that needs this love, to our country, a nation that is desperate for this love, and the world. a world that is dying from lack of deeply knowing this love. Let's together feel the power of this collective energy and inhabit this interconnectedness with deep reverence, knowing that our destinies are intertwined with the universe, with the entire cosmos itself. Through our commitments to one another, we create a world filled with connection, understanding, and love. By honoring these bonds wherever we are and whoever we are, may we find sacred peace in our unity with each other and with the divine. And gradually bring your focus back to your heart. Feel the warmth, sense the quiet, knowing you are but part of the whole and an indispensable part of this whole. Take a few more deep breaths. Open your eyes, gently return to the present moment. And if you have something on your heart this morning you'd like to share with us, please raise your hand and we'll bring you the microphone. If you have an intention on your heart that you are holding silently in your heart, let's all hold those intentions in our collective heart together right now. And indwelling divine with you, may we hold all these intentions in our collective heart with love. May we all carry this sense of connection and responsibility with us throughout the week, knowing the power our heart's energy has to impact the world, to empower us to be healers and repairers of our world. Amen.
Am I going the wrong way? Hello? A few ways to connect in the community this week. Today, if you're online, we're going to have What Are You Thinking on Zoom. You heard me talk about that a little bit ago. We'll invite you to that in a little bit. The film screening for 1946 is this afternoon. Artsy Group is meeting on Saturday, Centering Prayer Group next Sunday, Drop-In Self-Awareness after church next Sunday. We're going to be volunteering at Note in the Pocket, the clothing drive. Thank you all. I saw the whole baskets all that filled up out there. and then drop in Enneagram group on the 21st. Here's a big thing going on with our young people, and they have invited us. As a matter of fact, if we don't go, it won't be good. So it's a great big capture the flag game that includes flower bombs and fun for the kids, and there is also a sit in the shade under the covered pavilion option for, older folks. So come support our kids team as they are creating spaces for connection. I really like the way that this was phrased for Braver Angels workshop coming up. Learning to disagree better. I like that. If we want to be part of healing the rift in our nation, the rifts plural in our nation, essential skills, a great place to start. Shelby told us, 3 places to find out what's going on. You know what they are on our app, on our website. Open up the Thursday email. Shelby told us last week one of the things that they say to the young kids and say with the young kids every week. It is their way of saying, if you are here, you belong. That's a picture of the affirmation they've got downstairs. And I hear back frequently from parents and from the kids talking to one another that many of our kids feel just that they belong, that they are included. In the lived experience of teenagers, for example, you get to have crazy hair and you get to wear bizarre outfits and you get to have teenage too cool grumpiness and you get to have teenage overexcited youngness and belong. You get to be part of a community that accepts. So Shelby and her team with the young kids work really hard on that. I know that Heather and her emerging team with the teenagers work really hard to make that happen. It is a core value of our community, and they are working hard to make that for our young people. So from time to time, they feel a little bit alone down there, and I encourage us, let's help them not feel alone by supporting them. When they come up and join us, when we do things together, let's make sure that we interact with our young people. When they ask us to help clean up or do a project together with them, let's help with that. Come to a Thrive event, let's do the things that help them feel supported. What they're doing with our kids is really important. All right, I've got a date now. I'm going to start piloting this online course sometime in mid-August. I've also got my list open. If you would like to do it, let me explain what it is. I've got 21 lessons, 10 minutes to 15 minutes each, mostly on the 10-minute side. There's some interaction that goes on, and I want to work out the kinks before I start taking this out for public consumption. So if you would like to do that, it's probably an hour a week for 4 weeks. We'll run it through to mid-September. And so if you would like to participate in that and you have not yet given me your name, I've got the file with all the names of the people. Anybody want to do that? Oh, man. Okay, so Roger, let's just start saying your name out so I can. Roger. Then I saw Lisa. Who else? Say it again.
Anna. My name is Anna. Hi.
Oh, Anna. Shut up. Give me any shit. Who do you think you are? All right. I'm sorry. It's voice typing. I don't know why it started voice typing. Did anybody else? John? I think I put. Oh, okay, John. I think. Okay.
Can you recap really quick, like what all
Yes. Hold on just a minute. So, and I got 2 Johns now. Hold on. I got to make John and John. Anyone else? All right. So here's the quick recap of what it is. So I came from a great church. It was the best church I knew. And I knew the best church I knew wasn't connecting with young people. And so I knew there was a problem going on with religion in 1992. And so I started rethinking what church is. And when I got here to start a church, it was very disorienting because I knew I've got a very strong opinion of myself, but I did not think I could build a church as good as the one I came from. But I also knew the church that I came from was already not touching this age group. So I started a rethinking process, and it started with the story we tell ourselves as Christian people. Because our stories inform our instincts, and our instincts inform our actions, and our actions inform our institutions. And so we can't start fixing the institution. We've got to go all the way back and start with the story. So it started with the things that became the book. How do we think about God? How do we think about sin and salvation? How do we think about our core story? After we did that, and that took a long time because it's a very emotionally demanding process, we began to rethink our practices. Because I grew up in a church, you might have too, where the practices were read your Bible, pray every day, give your money. Read your Bible, pray every day, give your money. But it turns out that the tradition has a wealth of practices that are much richer than that. And we had done, read your Bible, pray every day, we had done that, and we're still finding that there was a lack inside. So we begin to expand also for the next many years. What are the practices? What are the things that are transformative of people? Then we begin to think, okay, that begins to be a functioning prototype of what church might be. How could we then organize around these principles? Because it turns out our organizational constructs hold our story within them. Our organizational constructs hold our practices within them. So if we change our story and our practices, how do we organize differently? So we've been working really hard on a prototype. And so now I'm in the process of transitioning leadership of our community to the next generation. And so I want to prepare them well. And it occurred to me, and turns out that it's really true, that there are other churches who also recognize that our religion is in trouble, who are also rethinking and stripping down to the core. And we've got 30 years of experience doing this thing. So I've put together this online course to be able to help our future leaders, but also help other communities do that as well. And so as it hasn't happened yet, but eventually my responsibility here at the church is going to start to diminish. And as it does, my hope is to increase my time and energy focusing on helping other communities do that. This online course is the first step in that. And it's written, it's prepared, it's all ready to go. It's not yet been beta tested. So that's what this group would be, is the beta testing. Now that you've heard all that, anybody else want to do it?
In these early steps of reviewing,
What would success look like? Find out all the sticky points and say, that doesn't work, Doug. Or that doesn't work, Doug, because we're going to use Slack for the online conversation, and I had a hard time logging in, that kind of stuff. Or I had a hard time finding the appropriate place to have that conversation around that lesson, those kinds of things. That's what success looks like. Shoot the thing full of holes, and then let me go fix them. All right, that was that. That was supposed to be like a 30-second announcement. All right, what are we working on now? A lesson, yeah. Oh, you want to? Okay, let me just put... Margie. Okay. Yeah, I just told you all this stuff. Okay. A side note before we begin today's lesson, I'm going to put up several books. You might want to have your phone ready to snap a photo. Most of these books are books that I've talked about in the past. There's only one that isn't. But if you're looking for some summertime reading, these really are great books. So now we can begin. So I was looking for a term to describe what I'm trying to do in this lesson. Because the original term that came to my mind was cognitive dissonance. I'm trying to create a little bit of cognitive dissonance, but it turns out that cognitive dissonance has a lot to do with your behavior, not just the thoughts you hold in your head. So the correct term, I found out, is dialectical tension. You don't need to know that. Having two thoughts in your head that are in tension one with another, but nevertheless holding on to them both. So here's the one. We have a culturally absorbed narrative in our heads that nobody should obligate anybody to owe anything to anyone. We've got that narrative in our brains. And we came by that story in our brains for good reason. Getting rid of that story is an attempt to redress long-standing power differentials. Because those who have historically been doing the obligating have not had a great track record of holding the best interests at heart of those who are being obligated. And Mag gave you a list of how we've lost trust of those power structures for a long time. So, developing this narrative of nobody gets to obligate anybody to owe anything to anyone, that's been a necessary corrective. But that internalized story may not be the whole story. In fact, it might be a pendulum swing. We were out of balance. And when a pendulum swings, it doesn't usually swing from out of balance to balance. It usually swings from out of balance to counterbalance. So it takes a while to come back and find a place of balance. So my hope in this lesson is to set alongside that narrative another, also valid, but held in tension narrative. So, dialectical tension, there you go. This is the narrative I hope to set alongside that one. We want to owe. I so much appreciated what Sue led us in that meditation, that when we consider the connectedness that we have to one another, those bonds of mutuality become our obligations to one another, but they're not odious, and they're not heavy, and they're not harsh. We want to be in that web of mutuality, which is a way of saying we want to be obligated. Now, we don't usually feel like we want to be obligated, but for the full realization of our human beingness, we want to owe one another. That's the story I hope to hold alongside the one that nobody obligates anybody to owe anything. There is something deeply beautiful in that mutuality. So, last week we explored the how. How do we owe? And we explored that it is not a power differential way. When unhealthy use of power has been in the mix, before we can rethink what we owe, we have to rethink power. And so I put up this slide and suggested that the problem has been that we don't appropriately map the kind of power exercised to the maturity of those upon whom the power is exercised. And I suggested that most commonly we get stuck in that third one, we get stuck in positional power. You do it because I'm the boss and I tell you to do it. And as the boss, I get my power from the company, or I get it from the school, or I get it from the church, or I get it from the organization. And so you do it because I'm in the position to tell you what to do. And the thing is, if the organization is working on something that gathers a whole bunch of people to work together toward the same objective, that is a very effective way for that working together process to happen. Strategies get laid at one level of the organization, plans get made at the next level of the organization, tasks are managed at the next layer of the organization, and tasks are performed at the next layer. And positional power defines who does what and who tells what to do and when to do it. So it's not just heartless, power-hungry, horrible people who keep us stuck in this third level of positional power. It's kind of baked into the way that we do things. But all of that doesn't change that when we exercise a kind of power that doesn't match the maturity of those upon whom the power is exercised, it creates pain, it creates problems. As people mature, they need to be led via a different kind of power. And when that doesn't happen, and it often doesn't happen, it makes all the sense in the world to develop a shared narrative that rejects the whole idea. Not gonna do that. So we talked last week about the fourth kind of power. In the diagram, it's position or persuasive power. We called it inner voice power. The whole point of working the circle The whole point of rediscovering firsthand spirituality as opposed to spirituality mediated to us by some other authority figure in an institution is to learn to listen from within and listen beyond our own ego voices, but also to listen beyond the external voices that would come and impose obligation upon us. We discern the internal divine center voice. Sue had us repeat it several times. We are, every one of us, carriers of the indwelling divine. So there is within a better angel's voice or a deeper wisdom voice or a interior source voice. And it is from there that we make our most significant decisions, including the obligations that we undertake, the obligations that we take on. So where do we get our obligations from? They come from within. Now, that's a really incomplete recap. If you missed last week, you can have a listen online. Last week was how do we owe? This week, I'd like to talk about what do we owe? But before that, a little bit more about something I said last week. Our nobody obligates anybody narrative, because it's a cultural instinct, it runs very deep within us. It shapes our most basic thoughts, emotions, feelings, actions, reactions. It is in there shaping how we live our lives, most of the time unseen. So I said that last week. So even should we come to the conclusion that we would want to do a thing or be part of a thing, even if we should discern an interior nudge that we ought to be doing that thing, that ought to be one of our things, we will still have to push against a whole chorus of voices, both internal voices and external voices, before we can change our actions, before we can change our behaviors, before we can change our thinking. Ours is a culture that is heavily skewed toward individualism. The philosophical roots that have prioritized the individual over the collective go all the way back to the Enlightenment. You might have run into in school Locke and Rousseau, some of those Enlightenment thinkers. It was an exciting time in Western civilization because we were just beginning to realize that there is more than the group. There is more than the clan. There is more than the village. There is more than the town. There are also individual rights, and there is also individual liberty. There is also individual autonomy, and that was a big, big deal in Western society. Then along comes the Industrial Revolution that removes us from the land and the community that worked the land together. And we developed new ways of organizing ourselves. We begin to prioritize business competition over agrarian cooperation. And we begin to develop a new idea of what a good person is. And there began to emerge the concept that a good person is a can-do, self-made individual. Make it happen all by yourself persona became our way of thinking, which we then amplified in our nation because we had this wide open frontier, and anybody who went out to the prairie or went to the Oregon, on the Oregon Trail had to make it on their own, had to make it alone. Then we added on top of that some technology. We created automotive mobility, which further began to break up the communal bonds of people who stayed in one place for a long period of time. Then along came the internet, and especially social media, and there began a tremendous social pressure for personal branding or for developing personal happiness, all of which seems very normal to us because we have lived in this Western trend for a long, long time. But in historical terms, that is a radical shift. The rise of excessive Western civilization is a radical difference from the way human beings have typically been organized. This is one of the books that I have referenced many times together. Because of the consequence of this shift, especially since 1963, many in our society have simply lost the skills necessary for collective behavior. We don't know how to do it anymore. We're not very good at it anymore. We don't know how to practice collective behavior, and we don't know how to exist together in collective spaces. Consequently, we gather together much less frequently. We work on things together for the common good much less frequently. We have fewer spaces in which that kind of thing happens. It used to be that just even 60 years ago, most people were in an organization that had rotating officers where everyone took a turn and began and helped run the organization. Those kinds of organizations don't exist anymore. And without realizing what was happening, we began to deprioritize our focus on the common good, and we begin to overly prioritize our focus on the individual good. And what that has done has reduced our sense of civic responsibility, reduced our sense of civic participation. In fact, a whole bunch of people have come to distrust civic organizations because communal organizations, by their very nature, come with mutually shared duties. Those organizations come with responsibilities that we carry one to another. Those kinds of organizations come with obligations. And consequently, since we distrust that kind of obligatory organization, we distrust the organization itself. So it's very commonly understood that we are in the throes of a loneliness epidemic as a society. Because of this focus on excessive individualism, ours is increasingly a society of social isolation. Well, of course, when our focus shifts from the common good to the individual good, sure enough, loneliness. Sure enough, isolation. Sure enough, the erosion of community, less civic engagement, less focus on the well-being of the whole. Something as simple as teamwork, a set of skills required to function together healthily as a team, those skills begin to atrophy, and it becomes harder for businesses to organize effective teams. And so some of the best leaders are those who still have the skills of putting together healthy teams, because as a culture, we have forgotten how to do those basic skills. Cooperation is a set of skills, and those skills atrophy, and cooperation becomes harder to do. And along the way, we feel deeply the sense of loss when we lose community. We feel deeply the disconnection that we have from others, and we struggle because of the loss of that intrinsically human environment. And while we feel that, we nevertheless don't realize that the very thing that we are chasing, this focus on the individual, is the very thing that is driving our interior sense of loss. Everyone bemoans the loss of community, but no one recognizes that it's our very instincts driving us toward excessive Western individualism that creates that deep sense of loss, our increasing sense of disconnection. Often we don't realize that at the core of the thing that we want so deeply, there is the idea of the social contract. There is the idea of the web of mutuality. There is the idea of mutual obligations one to another. So, what do we owe one another? We're going to see in a moment. We owe one another love. But let's see if these guys have anything to say about that, and let's see if what they have to say rings true to you. Aquinas was a philosopher during the medieval age, pretty influential in Western thinking, and for him, love was the most significant part of the human experience. And love, for him, was inextricably intertwined with virtue. He said, love is the source of the virtues. Love informs the shape of the virtues. Justice, for example, is a virtue. It emerges from the love of the other, because justice makes the world right for the other as well as being right for ourselves. But if we don't practice justice with love, it actually becomes very harsh, becomes very inflexible, can actually become very unredemptive. Courage is another virtue. It also emerges from the love of the other, because we practice courage to protect and to advocate for and to empower others. But practice without love, it can become reckless. Courage can become aggressive. It can become destructive. Love is the source of virtue, Aquinas says, and love informs the shape of virtue. In effect, love is expressed through virtue. Thomas Aquinas, which in essence says, owe one another virtue. Or, put another way, virtue is what we owe one another. When we do listen to the interior voice, when we do practice discernment, when we do go within and listen for the quiet nudges, countless generations have gone before us and they write back to tell us, here's what you're going to find. When you go within, you're going to find that you owe others as others owe you virtue. We owe one another virtue because we owe one another love. Now, C.S. Lewis, he was a British professor. You've probably heard the Narnia books. He's a writer and a theologian. And in his book, The Abolition of Man, I didn't put it up there, but as a matter of fact, you don't need to read it. Maybe just read about it. He says basically this: when we go within, what we will find is the same thing that all cultures and all societies and all philosophies and all religions have found. And that's true of classical Greek and Roman literature, classical Greek and Roman philosophy. It's also true of Confucianism. It's also true of Taoism and Christianity and Judaism and Islam and the Code of Hammurabi all the way back to Babylonia, and the Norse sagas and the Native American traditions distill the essence of all of those traditions, and there is a body of wisdom and a body of principles and a body of morality defined by the virtues. And those transcend all cultures, all times. And interestingly, that same body you will find in you when you go within and begin to listen to the inner light that we all carry. When we do quiet ourselves and listen, what he calls it is we will find the Tao, Taoism. We will find the way. We will find the path. It's in all of those cultures, it's in all of those philosophies, and it is inside of us. Jesus called it, or we called it what Jesus taught, the way Jesus taught it, the golden rule. There is a set of ways that we are human. It is a pathway that is true if you're here or if you're there, if you're now or if you're then. Rooted in love, it is honesty and courage and justice and compassion and respect. It is our duty to others. It is being our brother's keeper. It is generosity. It is virtue. Now, we don't have to pay our debt to one another. We can get away with not paying it. We don't have to owe one another love. We don't have to pay the virtues that love shapes. We can reject those universal principles. But if we do, Lewis argues, we end up abolishing our humanity. That's why he called his book The Abolition of Man. We become cogs in a system that dehumanizes us, makes us mere cogs in a system of just existing. But on the other hand, when we take these universal principles seriously, when we realize that we live in this web of mutuality, that we owe that to others and others owe that to us, we do maintain the deepest aspect of our humanity, the essence and the worth of our humanity. Our obligation to the Tao, that's what he calls it. And by the way, I'm sure that bothers Christian people, but it's C.S. Lewis, and they're supposed to love, Christians love C.S. Lewis, so he gets to say that. That obligation to the way, or to the path, is a contract of mutuality. It is how we experience our most authentic community. And Lewis ends up echoing what Aquinas says, but also ends up echoing what social scientists have been saying to us as a society for the last few decades. The breakdown of our communal connections is the primary factor in our skyrocketing rates of depression and anxiety. When we stress individualism to the exclusion of communalism, it makes us reluctant to impose mutual obligations on others. It makes us reluctant to have imposed upon us communal obligations. And as a result, nobody is obligated to anybody. And as a result, we feel alone. And as a result, we feel isolated. And as a result, we feel disconnected. Because community ties require a certain level of mutual obligation. Community ties require a certain level of shared responsibility. And without those, we are unable to forge strong communal bonds. Without those mutual obligations, we lose our strong networks of social support. And as a society, we are languishing in a world without strong networks of social support. Without those networks of support, human beings will and are experiencing diminished connection, diminished resilience, diminished fulfillment. And that's true at a personal, physiological, psychological, and emotional mental health level. It's also true at a societal level. So this guy, Fareed Zakaria, his book traces the history of Western democratic experiments from the 1600s until present. And it turns out that those times when the democratic experiment has gone very, very well, we have felt strongly our commitments to, our obligations to one another, to the greater good. Democracy goes well when a critical mass of us feel our obligations to our families, feel our obligations to our communities, and to our ancestors. I told you last week that story about I owe my father-in-law and I'm paying my son. We feel our obligations to our descendants. We feel obligations to our children downstairs, the organizations that we're part of. We feel our obligations to our collective life. But as focus shifts to individual freedom at the expense of collective well-being, to individual rights at the expense of collective well-being, we don't feel as strongly our sense of civic and community obligation, and consequently, we take our feet off the accelerator, and our communities begin to fragment, and democracy suffers. A year or two ago, I read, and I told you about it, a survey that somewhere in the high 90s percentage of Americans all agree the number one problem in our nation, we can't get Americans to agree in the high 90s on anything, but we all agree on this. The number one problem that we face as a nation is the breakdown of our social cohesion. We all agree. Those on the right think that's the biggest problem. Those on the left think that's the biggest problem. The challenge is both sides are also steeped in the Western individualistic narrative. where nobody obligates anybody to owe anything to anyone. Don't tread on me. That's a flag that gets waved by one of the parties. But the truth is, every American holds that visceral instinct deep within. Don't tread on me, even if we're not waving the flag. So while we feel the breakdown of our social contract, it doesn't occur to many that the solution to that breakdown involves carrying two narratives in our heads. Two narratives that are in tension with one another. Not only does the nobody obligate narrative exist, but along with it also we want to owe one another, and we want to be owed by one another. We want to exist in the web of mutuality because it is in that web of mutuality that human beings thrive. We want to do the things that we may not feel like doing in the given moment because we want what that web of mutuality creates. We want what those obligations create. There is a second narrative. And a balanced life, a balanced community, demands that we have that one in our heads along with. So in Dwelling Divine, may we hold those two narratives, and may we gain wisdom from both. May we gain direction from both, and may we discern wisely what our obligations are, what aspect of the path, the way, is ours to serve at any given moment. May that be so. Amen. What do we do next? Oh, that's right. Thank you. Those of you online, I talked to you a little while ago, and I told you there was going to come a time where we were going to invite you to click a button and get an email. This is that moment. All right, it's here. So we hope you will go to the notes there in YouTube, and if you're live on Sunday morning, you can click the one that says, "What are you thinking?" And that'll take you to a Zoom. And if you go to that one, the password, by the way, is 1417. You can just rewind and hear that again. But here it is, 1417. That'll get you in with a group of people. There's usually between 6 and 8 folks there, and they have a discussion like we're going to have in the room right now. They've been looking forward to the opportunity to make you feel very, very welcomed. We hope you'll click that button. But odds are, because we're watching the numbers, you're watching this later, and that's not going on right now. There's another link there that says, I'd like to get involved in some of the things you're doing online. And so there's book clubs that happen online. There's meditation groups that happen online. There's, Pearlie led a vision board thing. She did that online. There's lots of stuff that happens online, and we'd like to invite you to it. So you could also click that. I hope you will. And now we're going to dismiss you all. All right, let's get ready to dismiss the folks online. If you would, please put your hand on your heart, and let's remember as we go that we are, every one of us, carriers of the indwelling divine. That means that the fruit of the Spirit is within us. Love and joy and peace and patience and kindness and goodness is within us because we carry the interior light. And if you would extend your other hand to our city, let's look for opportunities to share what's already in us with the people that we live and work and go to school with, looking for opportunities to repair and heal our worlds. Amen. God bless you all on the live stream. I hope you will go click one of those links. Oh, you're dismissed.